Good afternoon. My name is David Bernstein. I'm President and CEO of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. Welcome to this edition of the CRCast, a bi-monthly webcast on Jewish advocacy and community relations issues. We're really delighted to have with us today Yotam Polizer, who is the co-CEO of IsraAID. You're not seeing him visually now. We hope in a few minutes we'll get a visual on Yotam as well. He's a good-looking guy. We're excited to see him as well as hear from him. But we are really excited, Yotam, to have you with us on the CRCast with the community relations field. I've been a long-time admirer of IsraAID's work, and it seems that whenever there's a tragedy, it's not long after that you see an Israeli team on the ground doing incredible work that makes us all proud. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but hopefully we'll get the video fixed. But I'm with you with my voice, and yes, as you mentioned, it's been a crazy time. It's always a crazy time for us at IsraAID, but the last couple of weeks, specifically with the hurricane in the Bahamas, it's been really, really intense. We have about 12 people on the ground right now as we speak. So. Yes, we've been there since day 2, and we'll probably stay there for the next 2-3 years.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's a typical project for us.
I want to learn more about this particular mission, but before we do that, I want to hear more about the broader mission of IsraAID. Tell us a little bit about IsraAID, how it came into existence, and your own role in it over time.
Sure. So IsraAID was established in 2001 by a group of Israeli activists who wanted to take the expertise and the knowledge that was developed in Israel and bring it to the most vulnerable places around the world. And since 2001 until today, we've responded to crises in 52 countries. And currently, as we speak, we have teams on the ground in 14 different locations. And what we're doing is we're trying to do 2 main things. One, we respond to disaster immediately, which is what you mentioned. We send a team usually within the first 48 hours to provide really life-saving support, to provide people with access to clean water, medical support, psychological support. But more importantly, and that's a story that I don't think many people know about us, we actually stay. So in each of these locations that I mentioned, we stay after the media and the cameras are gone, and we work with the community on their long way to recovery. And unfortunately, in these disasters, if you take the hurricane in the Bahamas, for example, it will take years for the community to recover and to rebuild their life. And IsraAID is really one of the few organizations that not only first on the ground, but actually is the last one to leave after the community is recovered and have the capacity to support itself.
That's incredible. So what are some of the humanitarian crises in the past 18 years that you've been involved in?
So I've been chasing disasters for quite some time. I'm with the organization since 2011. I joined right after the tsunami in Japan, in Fukushima. I led our relief mission there, which was 4 days after the tsunami. I was supposed to stay there for 2 weeks, but I ended up staying there for 3.5 years in Fukushima, and we built a trauma counseling support system in Japan that just didn't exist before. And then in 2014, when, finally with things under control in Fukushima, I moved to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa and led our mission in Sierra Leone during the peak of Ebola, and that was really scary and intense, as you can imagine. And then in 2015, I led our relief mission to Nepal after the earthquake they had, where over 10,000 people lost their lives. Nepal was quite an interesting, dramatic story because with a lot of luck and some skills, I guess, we were able to find the last survivor of the Nepalese earthquake, which was a lady who was trapped under the rubble for 6 days without food or water. So we pulled out 21 dead bodies, and the 22nd person was alive. And then in 2015, in the summer of 2015, I led our first mission to support Syrian refugees in Greece, in the island of Lesbos, where over 600,000 refugees arrived, primarily from Syria. And then since 2016, I took on the role of co-CEO. So I went back to live in Israel, and we're very lucky and privileged to have an incredible team working with us. Now we have about 320 staff members and about 2,000 active volunteers that are leading, that are running all these missions around the world.
How do you get funding for these missions and for your work?
Great question. From two main sources. One is individual donors, both in the U.S. and in Israel, people who really see the added value that we're bringing, and also want to make sure that Israel is bringing its expertise to these vulnerable communities. So a lot of family foundations, private donors, and then the other half, which might be a bit surprising, is a bit from institutional donors like the UN, the World Bank, and some government support. And they mainly support and fund our long-term missions, not our short-term emergencies. So it's about half and half.
That's great. So one thing that's very curious to me, at least, is why Israelis in Israel are so involved in this work. What in Israel's culture, or what in its sense of mission as a country led IsraAID to come to existence to do this work?
I think it's a combination. I mean, many of our team members are really inspired by Jewish values, and it doesn't mean if they're, if they belong to this shul or that shul. Definitely, we're inspired by Jewish values, but also we really believe that Israel, as a country and as people, developed specific expertise because of our own challenges. Whether it's water scarcity that helped us develop incredible innovation that could help provide people with access to clean water, or whether it's the ongoing conflict and the Holocaust and the trauma that helped us develop incredible models and programs to support people suffering from PTSD that we're bringing now to communities around the world. So we feel like we have the expertise, we have the tools to give, and we also have the responsibility to help. We believe that the poor people of our city comes first, but what is our city? Our city is now the whole world. We're all part of global climate crisis or refugee crisis, and it's really important for us that Israelis and Jews will have a role to play in these terrible, terrible tragedies.
So since you mentioned it, what do you see as some of the root causes of the humanitarian crisis? Is there evidence in your work that climate change is driving these crises? Are we seeing more crises like this, like what we just saw in the Bahamas today, than we might have 20, 30, 40 years ago?
The short answer is yes. Obviously, it's a bit complicated, but yes, we definitely see more hurricanes. There's a lot of data about it, actually. We see more hurricanes, more floods. We don't call it, by the way, natural disasters, because these are natural nature events. It becomes a disaster when the local government or the local community don't have the capacity to deal with it, and that's our role, is to help them and to help build their capacity so they can deal with it. There's also a lot of famines in East Africa that drives a lot of the conflict and a lot of the current refugee crisis that we're seeing. So definitely climate is playing a role. Politics is also playing a major role, especially when it comes to the refugee crisis. So I'll say both nature and people are the root causes. But that's also where the solutions lies, because I do see how, for example, the Syrian refugee crisis was for us a very unique opportunity to build bridges, not only save lives, but really build bridges and change people's perspectives. I mean, I have countless stories of interactions with Syrians that we've helped who, that was their first meeting with an Israeli or with a Jewish person. And that really, really changed the dynamic. So we also believe that that each crisis could turn into an opportunity. So we look at it from a very hopeful perspective.
So you mentioned the Syrian refugee crisis and IsraAID's work there. Tell us about that. I mean, how do you deploy in Syria? What's that like? Or where are you deployed when you deal with Syrian refugee crisis?
So we're not working inside Syria. We work with the refugees who escaped from Syria. So we had a project in Jordan, and one of our major programs is in Greece. And I spent a lot of time there, so I can share a few stories. But just a short story was that
Sure.
in the influx of the refugee crisis, which is the summer of 2015, we've seen 5,000 to 7,000 people arrived on these small dinghies, on these rubber boats every day to this island of Lesbos, which is a small island near the Turkish coast, but it's already part of Greece. And then the first people, these Syrian refugees, are the group of Israelis, and our organization is called IsraAID. We have, the Star of David. So we always joke that these people probably think they took the wrong boat when they saw the Israelis. But it was really interesting. One day, I remember there was a boat capsized just before it reached the shore. And I was there with a team of doctors. And again, I'm not a doctor, but we had an incredible group of doctors. By the way, many of them were Arab Israelis that we recruited because they speak Arabic and they can communicate with the Syrian refugees. And anyway, we were able to that day, unlike other days, we were able to actually pull everyone out. And I was carrying a very cute Syrian girl, probably about 4 years old, and half of her body was in the water when I pulled her out, and she was shivering and shaking my hands, and I can see that she's suffering from hypothermia. And when I handed her over to our doctors. They treated her, and she was okay. Her father, he was able to pull himself out because he knew how to swim. So, but he was shocked. And when he finally opened his mouth, he spoke fluent English, and he told me something that I always quote because I think it was quite remarkable. He said, "My worst enemy became my biggest supporter, and the people who are supposed to protect me back home in Syria are the ones chasing me away." So that was an opportunity for me to understand what that we really have a unique possibility here to build bridges with these people, and that's what we've seen with the Syrians. And again, we were there when the crisis started, but we're still working with the refugees right now, and we're one of the few organizations that stays. And I think that what really helps build these long-term relationships. And I do think we're making a difference in this chaotic part of the world.
So, when you talked about the Syrian refugee crisis intervention, you talk about being in Jordan. Does IsraAID have formal ties or informal ties with Arab governments? If so, which one, and how does that work?
It's a great question. Actually, Jordan is interesting because we do have diplomatic relations with Jordan. So we do have some connection with the Jordanian government. But more interestingly, we actually worked and operated in places where Israel don't have diplomatic relations. Of course, we have to take the security and safety of our staff under consideration. So we have to be very careful with, being very visible with the flags and the symbols. But the good news is that we were able to operate in Iraq, in Bangladesh, and also recently in Indonesia, 3 countries that don't have diplomatic relation with Israel. And the way it worked is we didn't really partner with the government because that was a bit complicated, but we did partner with a lot of faith-based organizations like local mosques and NGOs that actually invited IsraAID because they really heard about the expertise that we have in the field of water and sanitation and in the field of trauma care. We even just 2 months ago, it was quite historic, we were able, together with Bar Ilan University, we brought a group of 17 Yazidi women from Iraq to Israel for the first time to train them around trauma. And these are women who work with people who are sexually enslaved by ISIS. So we were able to bring all of them to Israel here for intensive training, and now they're working and providing treatment and counseling for really the women who suffer the worst atrocities I can think of.
So you were in Iraq. Tell me about that. How did that work?
So we were invited we were in the Kurdish region of Iraq, which is, again, still part of Iraq, but it's Kurdistan. So it's a bit less hostile, but still part of Iraq. And we worked there in the massive refugee camp with people who were escaping from ISIS. So we went there in the summer of 2014. Of course, the people who can travel to Iraq carry more than just one passport, because you can't just travel on an Israeli passport. You need to have another one. And we partnered with local organizations there that were very interested in the type of expertise we're bringing. And we sent altogether more than 20 missions and delegations in the last 5 years to Iraq to provide ongoing support, mainly in the field of trauma, relief distribution, and also some education for children who basically didn't go to school for more than 5 years now.
Fascinating. So, you know, the stories are so fascinating, and I'm tempted to ask you one more. Can you tell us, you know, you've been doing this work on a personal basis, not just as an executive. Give us a sense of how you've connected to a local population while doing this work.
Sure. So I'll give you, an example from a place that's part of the U.S. actually, Puerto Rico, where we've been really active since Hurricane Maria in 2017. So it's been 2 years. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we are very active in the Bahamas, but people forget that Puerto Rico is still recovering from a terrible hurricane. And again, we're one of the few organizations that's still there. And one of our main projects there is in a community called Patias, which is in the southeastern part of the island. They were cut off from electricity for almost a year. And as a result, they didn't have access to water because they couldn't pump the water. So together with the community, we built a gravity-based sand filtration system together with the local university and the local community. And that system is now providing people access, for over 2,000 people. They have access to clean water. And what's even more exciting about this project is that it's a hurricane resilient, because we know just today, there's another tropical storm arriving to Puerto Rico. So these are vulnerable communities that are suffering from these hurricanes on a yearly basis, and the system that we built is hurricane resilient and will serve them not only in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, but on any future disaster. And one of the leaders of the community, it's funny, every time he talks about IsraAID, I'm in tears, because he said, "You guys came like angels from the sky." So this is how these really terrible tragedies that we wish would never happen turn into opportunities to really build bridges between Israel and the world.
So, what role can American Jews play in amplifying Israel's humanitarian work in the world?
So I think there are a few things. Some of my colleagues are here on the call also, and what we're doing in the U.S. right now is a number of programs of engagement where we actually recruit professionals, we train professionals to join the mission. So, for instance, in the Bahamas right now, we have a mixed team of both Israelis and Americans on the ground. A lot of these disasters are very close to the U.S. Geographically, so it makes a lot of sense for us to bring Americans to work side by side with Israelis. And we're running different programs. Right now, we launched it in the Bay Area and in LA. We call it the IHPA and the IsraAID Humanitarian Professional Network. We also have a specific program for college students called the IsraAID Humanitarian Fellowship, where college students are actually doing hands-on work on the ground during their summer. summer break, and then when they go back, they advocate on campus. So this is two practical ways, but the other ways is we're really doing a lot of speaking events because we really need more people to know about this work. Not enough people are sharing the stories. So we're always looking for more opportunities to share the story in synagogues, in churches, in community centers, in practically almost everywhere, because we really need people to hear it and to become ambassadors for not only for the organization but for Israel as a whole. And of course, we need financial support because otherwise we can't operate. So any support really goes a long way in the countries where we operate, I have to say. Even an $18 donation could really provide, a kid with a month of schooling, for example, in some of these countries. So, yeah.
So, Yotam, give us an email address if there are any of the viewers who want to invite you or somebody from IsraAID to their community. Where can they reach you? How can they reach you?
Okay, so I think the best one, because it's in the U.S., so it's all on our website, by the way. So that's the best way to look. It's IsraAID.org. So IsraAID is IsraAID.org. And if you're looking for an email address, it's infousa@israaid.org.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Yotam, it really fills me up with pride to hear about the work that you do on behalf of Israel, on behalf of IsraAID. It's so impressive, and it shows Israel at its very best. And I'm glad to know that there are people like you who are organizing this work and are sharing your expertise with the world and making the world a safer, better place as a result. So thank you so much on behalf of us all. We really appreciate that work.
Thank you so much for having me, and we look forward to partnering more.
Great, we do too.
And Shana Tova to everyone.
Shana Tova, Shana Tova. The next edition of the CRCast will be on October 3rd at 1 p.m. with Michael Masters, who's the CEO of SCAN, which is the Internal Jewish Communal Security Organization. And we're going to be talking about creating a culture of security in the Jewish community. And as you can imagine, given the events in Squirrel Hill and Poway, there are threats that we are facing as a community where we really need to step up our culture of security, and we're glad to have Michael with us. We invite you to join us on October 3rd at 1 p.m. In the meantime, Shana Tova, everybody, and have a good day.